very good morning to you. Welcome to How to Be Upbeat in a Downbeat World. I don't know about where it is with you at the moment, but it is absolutely glorious weather here in the Somerset countryside in England. I'm curious to know why you've decided to attend this session. A rather intimate group this morning. Perhaps people are getting used to the idea that they don't have to get up so early. But I'm going to start by asking you a simple question, really, which is all about this chap. Do you know, this happened to me the same time last week, where the next slide didn't work. So that's not a good start, is it? Hang on a second. Let's just see if we can do this. Oh, we have about 11 people who've joined now. There we go. Superman, we all know Superman. We all grew up with Superman. But what the question I have really is, what is his weakness? We all know his weakness is something called kryptonite. And the arch villain in every Superman movie knows how to get hold of kryptonite. It's quite bizarre, really, because they obviously have Amazon Prime, I would say. Anyway, we humans have something that I call kryptonite. I'm not going to show you a picture of kryptonite, but I'd like you, if you would, to go to the chat area and give me some idea of what the kryptonite is in your life. All of the different sorts of things that drag you down, that drain your energy, that help you have a bad day, basically. So if you can contribute any of that, that would be really, really good. I know it's something to do first thing in the morning, which can be quite challenging for some people, but I would love to know, or the news of the coronavirus, perhaps. While you're doing that, negative people, yeah. It's the one good thing, I don't know about you, but the one good thing about isolation is that you actually don't spend a great deal of time with negative people and negative energy from other people. Yeah. So, I mean, I was sort of expecting that. And I'll tell you a little story, a true story of someone I was speaking to earlier this week, who is a very well-known person in the events industry. You'll probably know who he is, but I won't name him. And he was saying that he's getting so angry about the news, because he listens to the radio first thing. He listens to the lunchtime news. He's on the BBC news app all of the time. Then he listens to a program called, what is it called? It's the end of the day, PM, that's right. Oh, it's one of those days. And then in the evening, he watches Channel 4 News, and then he'll watch BBC News later on. And I said, now what sort of effect does that have? And he said, well, it just makes me angry. And I said, so why do you do it? I think we are conditioned to thinking it's the right thing to do, to actually take in anything and everything that the news throws at us. And I told him that I decided many, many years ago to apply a filter to my life. I never watch the news before I go to bed, and I never consume anything that's negative. I'm not sure I've ever watched a horror movie in my life. I don't want to do it. So those are the sorts of things that we can do, because I genuinely believe that what I'm talking about, what I'm sharing with you today, is stuff that we already know. And it's only now, I think, where we're being forced into a situation where we're starting to realize that actually it's not necessarily a bad thing. But what I want to stress for this very short presentation is that all of the things I'm talking about are connected. At the end of my conversation with my friend, he volunteered to me. He said, I think I'm going to take your advice. I said, I didn't give you any advice. I said, I think I'm going to stop, watching and listening to as much news. And I had a message from him last night saying he's feeling much, much better, which is great. But all of what I'm talking about is part of an online course I've developed over the years called Be Stronger, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, and spiritually. And this has come out of a talk that I started to do a number of years ago. And some really interesting feedback I've had from people who've attended that course. And, I remember at the end of one of the earlier courses that I did, somebody held back. And she was waiting and waiting to speak to me because there were loads of people hanging around. And she said, I've been diagnosed with depression, and you've just helped me realize that there is something I can do about it. So as a speaker, that's about the best sort of thing that you can hear. So at the end of this, if you'd like to go to peopleportfolio.com and register for a lot more of what I'm talking about today, it's absolutely free. You don't have to pay anything at all. And what I'm also doing is I'm putting together a podcast that will accompany this online course in the next couple of months as well. But I was doing a congress in, that's me in my kitchen studio. I was doing a conference in Barcelona a few months ago, and I saw these adverts on the metro all over the place. And I think that it really taps a nerve that we are all so incredibly tired all of the time, but you can pop a pill to sort that out. And I find that sort of rather unfortunate, because the key to all of this is your energy. And so few people are attuned to their own personal energy. And my view is that hundreds of millions of people around the world will give the energy of their smartphone a far more attention than they'll give to their personal energy. So how often do you think about your personal energy levels? And where are you on this scale? You know, is your energy level normally low, or is it normally high? What is your default setting? Is that by accident, or is it by design? And all of these different things are a symptom of low energy. So if you are exhausted most of the time, you're going to have slow reflexes. You're not going to have enthusiasm. If you haven't got enthusiasm, you're not going to want to do things. And there are all sorts of health risks associated with having low energy. So you're less likely to do exercise, which will make you feel worse. You won't want to have any physical activity with a partner. There's headaches that people get, low endurance. So all of these things are linked to low energy. So doesn't it make sense then to ask yourself some fundamental questions about your own personal energy levels? I'm not trying to tell you to do anything here. I'd just like you to spend some time to reflect on what your current energy level is and where it's at its highest, which part of the day, and where is your energy level consistently at its lowest. And what do you actually do to increase your energy level? I know a lot of people who don't exercise because they say, oh, it's so tiring. Whereas if you are somebody who exercises regularly, as I am now, you find that it actually gives you energy. And the final point on this slide I'd like to bring to your attention as well. We all have an inner voice, and that inner voice can either give us energy or it can take that energy away. So is your inner voice something that tells you amazing things about yourself? Are you a coach, or are you a bit of an assassin for yourself? And I found over the years there are certain types of people who will have an inner voice that's really, really critical. And if you're one of those people, if you change that voice, you increase your energy in a number of different ways. So as I said a moment ago, all of this stuff is interrelated. Now, most of the people on this course, and I've had a look at the list, are event managers. And each year, CareerCast in America, they publish a list of the most stressful jobs. And if you look, you can see that at number 6, I think it is, the event coordinator is one of the most stressful jobs, although at the moment, obviously, there's not a great deal to be stressed about on site, although I know for a lot of people where the next job is coming from or where the income is coming from is an issue. For me, I facilitate major international medical congresses, for example, and every single one of those has been cancelled. My entire business has just evaporated. And earlier this week, I had cancellations for jobs that I had lined up in November. So I understand how this is affecting so many people. So this is a sort of a fun part of it, but I hope it will give you something to think about as well. We all self-medicate in so many different ways. We might not necessarily think of it or call it that way, but this to me is the norm for hundreds of millions of people every day. This is your 24-hour clock. And this is what we do. We will start by having coffee. I have so many friends who tell me they don't have time for breakfast. Well, get up slightly earlier. And I have a friend who's a doctor, and she should know better. And she says, no, I don't have any breakfast. But she then admitted that she is constantly tired. And I said, you're starting your day with zero fuel. No wonder you're tired. The word breakfast is actually a breaking of a fast. So you may not have food the night before, but the morning is the time when you absolutely do need to have breakfast. And then what happens? And this is just an anecdotal theory for you to think about. If you watch late night TV, I think late night TV makes you fat. And the reason that I think that is that when we are, watching a movie or whatever late at night, we get up, we feel tired. And the brain says, I want and need and crave energy. So what actually happens is that we go for sugary things. So around about 11 o'clock, we might have a break, and then we'll have a Danish, or we'll have something that's going to give us a sugar hit. And, we'll then top up with more caffeine. So it's a sort of oscillating between caffeine and sugar during the course of the day. And then at lunchtime, we might grab a sandwich if we're on site. And this is a thing, if you're from a venue, please listen to this. I cannot believe how many hotels and convention centers just serve sugar and caffeine all the time. And when I'm on site, I absolutely try very, very hard not to get onto that, because yes, it gives us energy, but it's a very short-term energy. So we get a spike of energy when we've had caffeine. That will wear off very quickly. And then we get a dip of lower energy than we would have had without the caffeine. So then we'll have some sugar, etc. And the interesting thing about lunch, I was chatting to a client of mine who started in a company in the south of France a few months ago. And at lunchtime, everybody just grabs a sandwich and they work and sit at their desk. But he left. He would always go out. And after a few weeks, somebody said to him, so where do you go at lunchtime? And he said, oh, I go out into the park. I go and get some fresh air, clear my head, and sit in the park bench or whatever, in the days before the lockdown, obviously. And one of the guys then said, would you mind if I joined you? And of course, no. There was only one rule. They weren't allowed to talk about work. And more people in the office decided to do exactly the same. And the interesting thing is, come the afternoon, they were energized because they'd done something different. So it was part of an energy management system. But this is what we do. And then a little bit later on in the day, people will actually, do a little bit of that in the evening. That has become the norm, and perhaps we'll end the day with a bit more TV, stay up later than we should do, and then wake up in the morning and then we're feeling tired. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. So I hope this is just giving you some thoughts about maybe some adjustments that you could make during your day. Please feel free to put any comments in the chat. And all of this boils down really to the habits that we have. And we all have habits. Many of our habits have evolved over time. But think about the habits that you have as it affects your attitude of being upbeat in this downbeat world that we have. How many of your habits are helpful habits? How many habits actually lift you up? For a lot of people, the negative ones, they want company, don't they? You don't have to be that company. So what are your helpful habits and what are your unhelpful habits? I have a number of habits that I have specifically created for me. And I'm not suggesting for a second that you copy my habits, but my habits start the night before. I'll make some muesli mercha, which if you don't know what that is, it's a cup of oats and some raisins, and I pour milk on it. I put it in the fridge. In the morning, it has expanded, it's absorbed the milk. And then I will add things like nuts and seeds and fruit and all of that sort of stuff. So I know that that's part of my habit. I always go to bed at the same time. I wake up at the same time. When I wake up, I now do a strength training workout upstairs before I allow myself to go downstairs. So after I made my bed, I will then go and do my workout. After the workout, I will go downstairs in my house. Now, this might not sound like a big deal, and you think, why is he telling us this? The point I want to make is, when you have a daily routine and you have the habits that put you into the right frame of mind, you're starting the day in a better way than so many others who literally, they drag themselves out of bed. They don't make their bed. They'll go and do the things that they need to do in the bathroom. So all of this is habitual, but there isn't anything that they do that actually puts them into the right frame of mind for the day. So this is my morning. I'm not averse to caffeine, by the way. I have my very large homemade cappuccino first thing in the morning, and that's my breakfast as it was this morning. Well, so blueberries and raspberries and all sorts of stuff. And the interesting thing about habits, I mean, this is a really, really interesting book. It's by Charles Duhigg. I read it a number of years ago, and it talks about the neurological process of a habit. And we have a cue, and that puts the brain then into automatic mode. And then we'll have a series of actions. It's the routine. And then there's a reward. And I'll use an example where alcoholics very often will have the habit because they'll link the behavior to feeling relaxed, for example. And I know that there are a huge number of people who've been turning to alcohol here in the UK. Off licenses where you can buy alcohol have been classified as essential shopping, which I thought that was very, very interesting. So when you understand that there's always a reward within a habit, you can then change the reward and you can change the habit. I hope that makes sense. So play around with the sort of habits that that you have. So it all comes back to managing your energy and doing things that will allow you to boost your energy. And I want to talk now about your pet. And I'm not talking about these are not mine, they were a friend's. But a pet isn't something I would normally talk about in this, but I hope it will be useful for you. I'm not talking about animals. I'm talking about your personal effectiveness time and how it's linked to your energy. So here's a question. When are you at your most effective during the day? Are you a morning person? Are you a late person? That's about the circadian rhythms. We're all different. I'm definitely a morning person. I get most of my, what I call my deep work, or the important stuff that I do, between 5 and 9 in the morning. I will achieve more at that time of the day than I certainly will later on in the day. So it just makes sense then, when you understand when you are at your most energetic and when you're at your most effective, doesn't it really help to coordinate the two? And if and when you're working in close proximity to other people, right, between 9 and 11, Natasha, thank you for that. But would it be interesting to find out what your colleagues' peak effectiveness is as well? And then I know of a group who used to have a morning meeting every morning, and it was a complete waste of time for everybody, but that's what they'd always done. And when they did this exercise, they realized that actually the most important work they did first thing in the morning was, you know, between 9 and 10. So they stopped having that meeting so the people in the company could do all of their most important work, and then they would have the meeting a little bit later on. So think about how your energy level is linked to your effectiveness, and there is a very close link to that, as I'm sure you can imagine. So I've also been using this piece of software. It's a I've got Microsoft Office 365, and this is a productivity tool. And I've asked so many audiences over the last few years, how many people use productivity tools? And I found that maybe only 15% of the average audience use productivity tools. Now, some of you don't use that, but some of you will probably use that one. So Evernote and OneNote are the two biggest ones. There are so many others. You can download apps for all sorts of things. I'd be curious to know if there are any that you use that are different. Put that in the chat. I'd love to hear what those are. But the point I want to make is that when I have an older audience, and I'm a bit older than most people, in fact, on Monday I turned 62, but somebody in an audience once said to me, You're how old? You've got so much energy. Do you see? It's all about the energy. Trello is a good one. Yes, I've heard a lot of people use Trello. The point I want to make here, though, is find one, use it, put your entire life, and I mean your entire life, not just your work life. In OneNote, I have a file for my shopping, for groceries, what I'm running out of. I've got URLs I've kept. I've got an encrypted one for passwords. I've got, I mean, all sorts of different files. But the great thing is I know where everything is all of the time. And from a productivity and an effectiveness perspective, it really is fantastic. So the point I want to make is find one that works for you and then become a ninja, become the guru of that particular productivity tool. Really get to understand it. And you will find that you will have so much more productivity, which is linked to how you will feel at the end of the day. I mean, I know a lot of people who get to the end of the day and they feel, I didn't really achieve much. I was really busy, and it's because they don't have a focus. Now, one of the habits that I didn't mention earlier on, but it relates to OneNote, is that at the end of each day, I make a list of the most important things I want to do the following day. And the most effective people I have ever met all share this one tip. They always create a list for either the next day. So you either do it before you finish work, or you do it before you go to bed, or you do it first thing in the morning. I mean, I'm one that likes to do it the night before. So I always have the most important things first. And I always work on the most important things first. They're what I call my get ahead tasks. So once you've achieved those, you do the most difficult things first. The rest of the day becomes so much easier. I really hope this productivity tip is something that will be linked to how upbeat you feel, because so many people I know feel they're, overloaded, overworked. I mean, okay, maybe not now because of the lockdown, we're underworked. However, once you get on top of stuff, the way you feel about yourself will actually change. Now, when I grew up, we had this little mantra in our house, which is only brush the teeth you want to keep. Which I think is really, really cool. And I need to ask you this question, who taught you mental and emotional hygiene? We don't. We're taught physical hygiene. We're taught to have a shower every day and all of that sort of stuff. And this is all part of being proactive about being upbeat when everybody else is sometimes a lot more downbeat. A little bit of a plug. Many, many years ago, I wrote a dating book. This was called How to Be the One. The ebook is exactly the same, called How to Be Loved from Dating to Mating. They're still available. The ebook is more available. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that the book was not about how to snag a partner or how to trick or manipulate a partner. It was about what you can do yourself to become somebody who the people that you meet would choose to stop looking for somebody else. So what is it about you that would make people want to stop their search? And part of that was the introduction of something I call your emotional core. If you do exercise, if you're an athlete, you will know about something called core stability. And core stability is where you have muscle strength within your pelvis. So it gives you stability, flexibility, and inner strength. And professional athletes always work on their core, because if they get injured, they actually repair quicker, and it gives them that solid base. So I thought to myself many, many years ago when I was putting this book together, well, what are the emotions that give us emotional strength, emotional flexibility, and emotional stability? And I came up with these: self-esteem, attitude, happiness, and kindness. I'll just mention kindness now. Kindness has got a bad rap, I think, in that, a lot of people think that kindness is actually a sign of weakness, that they confuse it with being a people pleaser. Kindness to yourself is probably one of the best things that you can do to become somebody who is calmer, more at peace, and therefore more likely to be upbeat. So kindness starts with you. Be kind to yourself first. And I believe that it's so much easier not to be kind. Therefore, it's much more difficult to be kind. There are people, the negative people that were mentioned earlier on, who don't perhaps deserve kindness, but it takes a lot more energy and effort to be kind to people who perhaps don't deserve it. So working on your kindness will actually help you in terms of your reputation and the way you feel about yourself. Happiness is a really interesting topic. I mean, I could talk for hours just about happiness. I mean, people have said to me, Roy, you're so happy. And I say, yeah, I mean, if I was any happier, I'd actually be twins. I really do remind myself regularly how lucky I am. I mean, I'm in the countryside in England at the moment. I'm very, very lucky. I've got a huge garden that I'm working on during this lockdown and isolation. So I really do count my blessings. So how often do you think about what you have to be grateful for? It's a simple thing. I mentioned a doctor earlier on, and I said to her, I said, why don't you make a list of what you have gratitude for? And she really struggled with it. And I said, well, start with the fact that you are basically a healthy person. You understand stuff that a lot of people don't. You're qualified as a doctor. You've got 2 loving children. You've got a loving husband, etc., etc. And I said, just build it up. And I suggested to her that she create a little journal. You know, I don't know whether you can see this. My camera seems to have disappeared here, but you know, you can get these sorts of journals and write in them about what is really working in your life. And if on those days where you're not feeling that fantastic, and we all have ups and downs, then you can go back to your happiness journal and just look and see what it is that, you know, you've got going for you. Attitude is brilliant. Do you feel that the world is against you? Do you feel that you don't get all of the opportunities that you deserve? That's flicking the same switch as you flick with happiness. Happiness is a decision. Your attitude is a decision. You can decide to be happy, but it does boil down to reminding yourself to flick that switch. And then self-esteem comes back to what I mentioned earlier on about that inner voice of yours. You know, is it something that looks after you? You know, is it a fan or is it an assassin? And I know so many people who beat themselves up in an incredible way. They don't even realize they do it. Somebody joked to me once, said, well, I'm just naturally downbeat. And I said, naturally? He said, well, if I smell flowers, I look for a funeral. Well, you know, it's because they're not thinking about what they've got going for themselves, and they will change the voice to become more empowering. I mean, if you've ever met any top performing athletes, they've all got coaches, and the role of the coach is to be that encouraging voice. We don't always have coaches, but we do have friends. You know, you talked earlier on about negative people. Well, you want to avoid those, and you want to find people who lift you up, but you also need to be one of those people that lift other people up as well. So what is that voice that you have? And if you're thinking to yourself right now, do I have a voice? That's it. So think about what is the general sense of your inner voice. And it's also about, you know, linked to your attitude is your mindset. Do you have what I call a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Let me just talk about the difference. The fixed mindset is just believing that you are who you are. You're never going to achieve any more. You're never able to create any new opportunities. You are just who you are. Whereas somebody who has a growth mindset looks at a situation, and today is a fantastic example where, you know, billions of people are in lockdown. You know, do you have the capacity to deal with this difficult situation? And if you decided that you don't, you will crumble. If you decided that you can, you could thrive. And it really does boil down to, what is your mindset? Is it fixed or is it a growth mindset? I mean, I'm such a believer in monitoring our own thoughts. And I worked in the media for the BBC for a very, very long time. And I'm aware now of how much negativity I used to, you know, put out every night for the early evening news. And as I said earlier on, I don't do that anymore. but we all allow people to a lesser or greater extent to infect us. And there's a couple of different types of thinking. On the right, there's the plug hole thinking. That's you get into a mindset where it just drags you down into the vortex and you feel worse and worse and worse. All you have to do is recognize when that type of plug hole thinking is starting and go, ah, I know what's going on here. And you stop it, you flip it to what I call thermal thinking. It's what these birds of prey do. They find a thermal in the air and they use that situation to lift them higher. Now, you might think this is a bit simplistic. It is in one way, but actually it really does work. But it starts from the point of, are you allowing yourself to be sucked down, or are you being proactive about lifting yourself up? Now, this is my usual office. That's the Hamburg Convention Center, which has been closed for quite some time for a refurb. But that's sort of what I do. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty stressful job what I do when I'm doing it. You know, when you've got 5,000 to 7,000 people attending an event and you're the guy on the stage making sure that you know, you hold it all together, it can be very, very stressful. And I've had situations where, and I was sharing this the other day with somebody, where I was sitting in the audience down in the bottom left-hand corner with my client, the CEO of this particular organization, which is the European Association of Nuclear Medicine. So these are all nuclear physicists. And they had a speaker who was a little Japanese man, and he was little. And what he did at the halfway through his presentation, he was struggling to look over the lid of the laptop. So what he did was he closed the laptop lid. And my chief executive turned to me and he said, Roy, we have a problem. And I said, what's the problem? He said, he's just shut down the entire AV system. He said, I need you to fill for 5 minutes while a technician goes on the stage to reboot the system. I said, he's going to finish in 2 or 3 minutes and you want me to talk for 5 minutes? He said, yeah. So I then had to go on stage and talk for 5 minutes. And basically what I did was tell a load of stories. And the following day I was doing a presentation skills workshop for a bunch of the young people there. And I asked them who was at the opening ceremony, and most of them were. I then said, anybody notice anything odd about what happened? And nobody had. I told them the story. And that's what you have to do. So stress is part of my job. It's slightly different to the sort of stress that you have, but I think we understand each other. But what I do at the end of every job, I deliberately recharge, and I call it having a zombie day. So many speakers I know have copied this. They have zombie days too. I mean, that's an ex-girlfriend. No, it's not really an ex-girlfriend. But schedule recharge time. When you get busy, it's a natural part of, you know, the recharging of your mind. One of the things that I do, because I don't have to be any good at it, is I'm a very keen gardener. This is a bit of a mess at the moment, but I'm working on it. And I use this flower at the very beginning of the presentation, just because it's springtime, you know. And this is what I do to deal with my own situation. So hopefully this has given you some thoughts and ideas. We are running out of time, but I want to just introduce you to one other thing. I don't know if you've got young children. If you would like to educate or brainwash them into being a happier, more upbeat person, they get lessons in just about everything else, but we don't teach people how to be happy. And I shared this little diagram with a professor of immunology recently, and he was absolutely over the moon with it. He said, I've got to write this down. I've got to write this down. I've got grandchildren. So he wanted to share it. So the first one is you draw a little smiley thing on your thumb, and you just remember to smile. Smile a lot more than you might be at the moment. I mean, all too often I'll ask people, are you feeling very happy? And they said, yeah, I'm really happy. I said, well, tell your face, you know, so smile a lot more. The second one is, I mean, I use this as the reminder. So just a finger that I'm putting up, and that's a fishing line that will go into water. Just drink more water. I don't know what it is, but everybody I know who's got lots of energy drinks a lot of water. I drink a lot of water. Some people say, well, I don't want to drink a lot of water because it makes you want to pee all the time. Well, actually, the reality of it is, for a few days, when you start drinking a lot more water, that does happen. But as your body rehydrates, you absorb a lot more of the water and it doesn't happen so much. So, drink more water. That will give you energy. That will contribute to feeling more upbeat. The next one is, if you're allowed to by law, walk a lot more. I do a 1 hour walk every day. Haven't been doing it recently, I have to be honest with you. I've been working on my garden. But the next one is, so I will do this now as a sign. This is a face mask that you would put on in an aeroplane, and it's about breathing. Breathe more deeply. Breathe deeply, and we don't do it. And the basis of meditation and mindfulness and all of these sorts of calming things always involve focusing on your breath, and we tend to not do it. But without breathing, we ain't got much left. And then the last one is the best way of increasing your energy is getting a good night's sleep. A few months ago, I stopped drinking alcohol, and I'd have to tell you, my sleep patterns have improved massively. No interruption of sleep, a deeper sleep, because alcohol, and if you want to drink alcohol, that's entirely up to you. I've got no problem with it at all. I've probably drunk a lot more than you have over the years, because I'm quite a lot older than most of you. But one of the interesting things about alcohol is that it's a sedative. So it does help you fall asleep quickly. But actually, when the effects of the alcohol wears off after about 3 or 4 hours, you will then wake up perhaps, and you won't go back to sleep afterwards. So it stops the actual sleeping. I'm just aware of the time. We've got another 5 minutes to go. And I want to share just one more thing. That is something that you want to consider about what your life is. And I call this the saucepan of life. And somebody, when I showed this to an audience, called out, said, I was feeling upbeat until you showed me that, because I've got some serious surgery next week. And this is basically what it is. I call it the saucepan of life, because no matter where you are, I'm hoping to reach about 90. I mean, you never know what's going to happen these days. But this is really what I have got left. So I don't know where you would be on that scale, but what are you going to put in that saucepan? What are you going to do with your life to make it meaningful? It's a decision. You can decide to do something about it. And if you've got children, look what they've got ahead of them, one hopes. So, it really is down to that. So this is my life. I'm making the most of what I'm doing. So I hope that this has just given you some things to think about during this session. If there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm very happy to take any questions, whether it's about this or anything else. Interesting, I mean, I've put my contact details on there. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, please feel free to do it. People Portfolio is where my online course is. You can register for that for free. And because I've been presenting at major conferences for a very long time and doing online events, I've just launched a little new website called MrOnlineEvents.com. So I'm doing a lot more online events. I've been doing some medical webcasts and stuff for years, but I never actually concentrated on it. But I think more and more people are doing that these days. Anyway, I really hope that this has been a useful way to start your day today. I wish you all the very best. Public holiday here in the UK, it's Good Friday. Easter is coming. I hope you're able to enjoy the good weather without breaking any curfews or lockdowns. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the UK where the police are saying you're not allowed to do all sorts of things. So we all need to keep safe. I hope you do keep safe. And thank you very much indeed for your attention. If anybody wants to contact me for anything, please feel free. Oh, one more final thing. On LinkedIn, if you go to LinkedIn, happy to connect with you. But about 10 days ago, I posted a little video, it's about 10 minutes, on online meeting etiquette. So the tips of do's and don'ts of when you go online. And I looked this morning and it's just under 3,000 views. And I've never, ever in all my years had so many shares. There've been about 50 or so shares. So I hope that this has been useful. I could have done so much more, but thanks very much indeed. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye-bye.